How do our muscles work? And why do we need to know that? So today we're going to have a look at how muscles work, how the body uses them, and most importantly, why do we need to know that? To understand how to make our efforts as productive as possible, we first need to understand how our body works. Specifically, how it recruits muscle fibers based on effort. Something most people are surely aware of is what we can use our muscles for. We can lift, we can walk, we can run, we can climb, we can swim, we can't fly. But yes, we can use our muscles for quite a few different things. Years ago, I had this really itching thought. The background to my thought was that my calf muscles had grown extremely well when I was younger by just contracting them as hard as I could. And I thought to myself, what if I could grow the rest of my muscles just as good or even better by just contracting them as well? From a logical standpoint, I thought that the muscles can't possibly know whether it's lifting something, holding something, or simply just contracting as hard as they can. A few years later, after some really bad injuries, I began researching the topic. And what I found was absolutely mind-blowing. Could I have been wrong for the past 20 years? Another thought came to mind. Do you really need to lift heavy weights explosively and risk injury to trigger muscle growth? I realized that this was something people already knew about. There had been numerous studies on the subject on what actually triggers muscle growth. Decades ago. How could I possibly have missed this? As it turns out, this was something that the American scientist Dr. Elwood Henneman studied already in the 50s, which later laid the foundation for what's called the Henneman size principle. Now here's a biceps muscle. Inside, there are a mix of both smaller, weaker endurance type muscle fibers and thicker, stronger, larger fibers in different packages that are called motor units. Something Henneman observed was that since we initially only use as much muscle fibers that are really needed, we need to exert ourselves more than what the small endurance type fibers can handle to activate the larger, stronger fibers, which are also the ones that grow. Now, this is something that is quite clever from an evolutionary standpoint. Depending on how much force is needed, you can use smaller, more endurance type fibers for easier tasks, or gradually more or all of the muscle. Now, here's an interesting thought. Many believe that exercise must be either heavy and explosive to stimulate the larger muscle fibers and more endurance-based to work the smaller ones. What if it's possible to stimulate both at the same time? Another important discovery was that when we fatigue the small endurance type fibers, the body also starts to use the large fibers to continue. Because fatigue means that we momentarily get weaker and more fibers are needed to continue produce the same levels of force. Just as the size principle suggests, we can use either heavy weights and explosive movements to activate the large muscle fibers. We can also activate them by fatiguing the small fibers first, using less weights and no sudden or explosive movements at all. It really doesn't matter as long as the level of effort is high enough. This means that we can choose a way to exercise to stimulate all parts of the muscle, from the tiniest fiber to the largest. And just like I did, now you might be thinking, how do I do this? Don't worry, I got you. Next episode is about